Hello, everyone, and welcome to the American Scouser podcast. It is Monday. We are back. Well, us two are back, and BJ is here. BJ is here. Greetings, he says, but I know deep inside he's hurting because he doesn't get to ask trivia and get you guys stumped this week. We had a good one this week, actually, too. But I'm your host, as always, Timushin in cold ass Chicago. And with us this week is Gally, as always. Gally, what's happening?
Oh, not too much. I love the fact that we don't have trivia when Paul's not here, purely because we don't want to have that segment without putting him through that pain. At the same time, I like the fact that you respect the fact that I will just ruin a segment by myself with stupidity and bad answers. So hi to everybody from Kazi to BJ, right across the world.
Well, I mean, here's another thing. Like, you need Bickler so that he buys you those extra, 30 seconds of, thinking time, too. I don't want to put you on the spot like that. So,
Absolutely.
Yeah, Bickler is under the weather, under a blanket, shaking, shivering somewhere. So hope he feels better, and he'll be back with us next Monday. We're gonna fly just us two, and with a ton of live audience over here. Cosgrove says, "Where's the Liverpool Skip Bayless?" And honestly, good thing Bickler is not here, because the moment he hears Skip Bayless, he would probably go. Alan is here, bragging about how it's freaking 48 degrees in Houston. First of all, you're late. Second of all, no one cares if it's warmer over there or not.
Yeah, you are late, Alan. I'm disappointed, thoroughly disappointed. You might be the first one kicked off the island. But it was actually 44 degrees at one point this afternoon in New England. So we're supposed to get close to 50 degrees tomorrow. I don't know how this is happening. I don't like talking about political things that rhyme with, robo warming. But there is a reason that it's really warm up here and we're not having a lot of winter anymore. So I will say, Alan, if it's only 48 in Houston, then you should really probably feel bad for yourself, because the people of New England think that feels kind of balmy right now.
Yeah, you know what that means, buddy. Time to move. Time to move to the East Coast. 61 and stuff. What is going on? I mean, freaking Florida is 75. Yeah, I mean, we're getting a heat wave this weekend in Chicago. It's supposed to be in mid-30s. So can't wait. Pretty excited about that. Looking forward to that. So let's get to our boys. We'll start with the game, I figured. So, Gally, give me a reason why we should talk about this game after we talked about the Chelsea game. What was different? I think if we compare it to the old Brighton game, there's a huge difference. Even Klopp said, yeah, we lost, but it was a lot better. But I think when the bar is that low, obviously there's going to be an improvement. Compared to the Chelsea game and with similar lineups and stuff like that, I mean, what is the biggest difference that you saw?
Well, I mean, the biggest difference was we lost instead of drew. We conceded 2 goals. I think there's frustration in that. I think a comment might have just come in about the subs. They didn't work in this match. I think they worked a little better in the Chelsea match. But let's be honest, nothing really worked in the Chelsea match except for we didn't concede. And for me, that was the one really driving factor coming out of the Chelsea match, was could we build on the defensive stability that 4 created at the back? And I don't feel we really did that in this Brighton match. We gave up big chances again. Brighton took 1 or 2 of them, missed a couple as well. And
mind you, we gave those in the Chelsea game too. We even talked about it last Monday that they could have easily scored if they were able to finish.
Oh, absolutely. The set pieces alone in the Chelsea match, I felt like we were giving up one after another. And again, we concede on a corner. And I know it was off a deflected shot, but it was also off a weak defended ball to create the corner. And I think that was my real problem with the corner. And I know me and Kazi in the Discord were arguing about whether the deflection was warrant of bad defense on the corner, and I'm actually with him. It was a fluke goal, the first goal. Anytime a defender turns in a ball that's going to go wide, that's what you consider a fluke goal. But it was kind of lazy closing or not closing down by Gomez once again in the first half that led to that corner. And I think when you're struggling to defend free kicks, you can't give them away cheaply. And I felt like once again, we came into this first half giving away cheap free kicks and giving away corners and set pieces. And we put ourselves under pressure. And unfortunately, it led to their equalizer.
And some of those set pieces that you're giving is basically you're like a second late, you're a half a second late to the tackle and stuff like that. Especially we saw that, honestly, we saw that more once we did the subs. And I think that's why it really went down, because it totally shut down the momentum. We were kind of like slower to everything suddenly. And then we were making the fouls, obviously, like Fabinho and stuff like that. But I feel like, I mean, like Kazi is saying, you know, there was more like attacking impetus. I did not see that personally. I think what we're really lacking right now, you look at this team, and I know we talk about midfield all the time, and we kind of like touched up on this last week too. I really think we don't have any fear going forwards to teams now. So they're able to attack a lot more at will than they used to, because I just feel like we're not putting the same scare as we did when we had Diaz on left, you know, Bobby in the middle, Mo on the right. Regardless of like what kind of an arrangement you had speed, you had like interplay, and you know, you force teams to defend a bit more. I just feel like there is not as much anymore. You can park somebody back there and kind of like cover us comfortably, looks like. So people are able to push their backs up and stuff like that, which obviously is harder to defend then. So I really think I did not see, like, what do you think of the attacking or like offense that we have in recent games?
I think there's a issue with the fluidity of the front three in general right now. And I don't think it matters who's up there. If it's Elliott, if it's Mo, if it's Nunez or Gakpo. I thought this was Gakpo's best performance yet in a red jersey. I thought he looked the part of the complete footballer, which is why I think Klopp plays him through the middle, which is just driving all of us crazy, because we all know he wants to play out wide left. And we want Nunez, I think, to play through the middle and learn to be the central force that we paid 90 million pounds for, to score goals and be that, you know, number 9 that we so need. So I think Klopp sees him more as a Bobby Firmino type player, though, like a footballer. And it's taken a little bit for him to understand the positions. He put people in 2 or 3 times in yesterday's match. He ran behind 2 or 3 times and had opportunities. Once he was found, and the other 2 times he was missed. And he had 2 or 3 killer balls, including the one to Harvey Elliott that I think Kazi mentioned earlier in the chat, that if he gets a good first touch on it, you know, he's got a brace and we're up 2-0. If Mo doesn't finish the first one and we're up 3-0. So there were opportunities to score goals. And I think you have to find that as a positive, but we're still struggling to balance.
And I think that goes back to, you know, Kazi is saying, you know, super poor right now. Basically have 6 first-team players out: Jota, Diaz, Bobby, Verge, and then, you know, Fab and Hendo are there, but they're like twin brothers or something like that. It's not the same guys that we're used to. And you look at that, that's the spine right there of a team that you're missing. And I think that it really shows, because there is like a lot of disconnect between lines. And, you know, you play against a good team like Brighton, that's a lot easier to take advantage of. And I think even Klopp was saying that they made the adjustments compared to the game that we lost 3-0. And they were able to kind of like stop those balls to get in between the lines that we have. But as we made the subs, that went downhill. So what do you put that to? Are these guys that out of form? Or it's just a matter of, you know, you make subs, which you have to. I mean, you could tell, even in the Discord channel, people were saying that, you know, we need subs fast, because you could see tired legs. You could start to see the tired legs in midfield. So you had to make the subs. Is it just a matter of form, or is it just a matter of putting in cold guys into like a high, fast-paced game and basically not being able to keep up pace with it?
Well, I think it's putting in guys that are used to starting. Right? They're used to starting. Jordan Henderson isn't used to coming off a bench and making an impact in the 60th minute in his 30-plus-year-old frame. He's used to having the mental preparation that morning, getting ready, starting, stretching, playing the first half and maybe finishing the match, if not coming off late. So I think you're asking some players right now to do things that it's not exactly in their skill sets. I think for Henderson's sense, he's completely out of form, out of confidence, and maybe the legs really are run off him. Maybe going to Qatar and playing such important minutes, both physically and emotionally, in the World Cup, kind of wore on him a little bit more than we even thought. Because he's been a shell of himself since the World Cup.
Yeah.
And Fabinho, we've been talking about this on this podcast since the middle of the second half of last year, from about April on, that his form was dropping and that it got really poured down towards the stretch. We thought a summer would give him the recharge. I don't know that it worked.
Nope.
We didn't bring in any cover for him, which didn't help. And he's gone through a lot of personal stuff, like having his first baby, which, I can only imagine is a major stress thing on any human being's life. I don't have a child of my own, but I'm sure you could attest twice over that is a big change.
Dude, you had a freaking puppy and your life changed. Just imagine.
And for that reason, I try not to pretend like I understand. So for all the reasons we talk about, Fabinho's obviously dropped off. The one that really baffled me, though, was Nunez. And I was clamoring. I was frustrated when I saw the lineup come out. I won't lie, that Nunez wasn't starting. And then I thought to myself, maybe Klopp just knows I don't have a fully fit side and I need a game changer from the bench. I want a person who can come in and win the match. And then he came in, and in my opinion, the entire attack basically went south as soon as Nunez came in the match. I thought he was really, really poor. Worst I've seen him in a while.
Yeah, the interplay definitely stops. I mean, you maybe gain some pace over the top and stuff like that, but it felt like the interplay and movement suddenly stopped when Nunez came in, and I was obviously that could to do with all the other changes too. Maybe that affects the front. I think sometimes we isolate a line a bit too much without considering what's changing on the other ones, and especially with midfield and front. It just feels like those two lines, where is Bobby when you need him, that we're not able to connect it as well. Or Harvey could be that player probably, but we have to use him on the wing. And I think that's so. You think really that was the decision making behind Nunez? I almost felt like, going back to what Bickler kept saying, that he didn't want a strong lineup over here. The league was more important. There was no point in trying to get 90 from Nunez. Let's, because we need him in the Premier League coming up this weekend to start.
I just feel like you didn't even start him against Chelsea. You hadn't played him the match before. It just felt like this was an opportunity to get him off the snide. And you have a week off before your next match. It's not like they're playing midweek because, we're not in the League Cup semifinals like last year. Like, we're not playing every match on offer. So you had a week off. He hasn't been scoring. I felt like it was an opportunity to just go out there and attack and start with Mo, Gakpo, and Nunez through the middle, or, probably Gakpo through the middle and Nunez on the left.
Yeah, probably. Yeah.
But it just didn't make sense to me to sit Nunez in this match, except for you're bringing him on to be the impact, game-changing sub because he's the only one you have. And then when he comes in, it just felt like, other than that one time where he brought it down the left, cut it back inside, and you thought he was going to shoot, and then he laid it off to, I think, no one. He dropped it off, and it was just intercepted by the defender. And that was when Klopp started screaming about, tell him I'll take him off, and they caught it on the microphones. And I thought that was almost like him yelling out onto the pitch to get a message to Nunez, like, let him know if he won't shoot, I'll take him off. Because, he sent him out there to win the match.
Yes.
And then he tried to
that
pass.
Was extremely frustrating. But you
It
know, that's
just
the thing with the striker though. Like, you can't freaking win. Like, if he takes a shot over there, you're like, dude, why don't you pass it to a better guy or something like that, and then not be the striker that takes the shot and stuff. But I think, you know, obviously, like Mo missing that chance. So there's a lot of talk about Mo, and of course, you know, it's a lot easier to come afterwards and like criticize everything. Well, like, maybe we should have kept money and not Mo and stuff like that. So last time Bickler wasn't here, we made a pie. And with this diet I got going, the more pies we make, the better over here, virtual pies. So let's make a pie with Mo. So Mo's current performance slash form slash lack of productivity. Where do you put that? How do you divide that between? Because I personally am not buying the, oh, he got his contract and he settled, because I don't think he's that kind of a personality. You don't take care of your body like that, and you know, live that lifestyle and stuff like that, and just be, oh, you got the contract now. Like, it's not like he's like eating baklavas over there and kicking back. But between like Mo and or do you put it because of like the midfield and like how many balls he's getting fed? The system where he's like holding, you know, hugging the linesman most of the season so far, or the fact that we're missing so many people up front and there's no consistency, cohesion. A lot of slices in this pie.
there are a lot of slices there. So I'm gonna try to serve this up for the listeners here, without as much confusion as the question. So, one slice. He is definitely too wide. In the current formation and setup, he's just not in front of goal enough. And we know that Mo's not a guy who needs 2 chances to score a goal. He probably needs 3 or 4 chances, and then he scores his goal. And that's okay. That's the type of player that he is. So he should be, as much as possible, moved inside, if not played centrally, especially now that we need to get him going. Second slice, I think too much is being talked about the weakness and the terribleness of the midfield for why the offense isn't firing. And the only reason I say that is I think the midfield has given the offense opportunities to attack in the final third, and our top 3 aren't firing together. I do think that Bobby being gone is a huge part of that. And don't make fun of me. I've been saying it all year long.
I didn't even say
I know, but you were about to.
Yeah.
But I have been saying it all year long. But I also think what's not getting talked about, and I started saying this a few weeks ago, I think Jota has been missed a lot more in all of this, from the way we played to the extra goals we scored that won us matches that were going to be draws, or got us draws that were going to be losses, where we just pop up and score one of those random headers out of nowhere, and you're like, we scored. And then you're like, oh, it's Jota celebrating in front of the cop. It makes sense. He just pops up in a spot you don't even think he'll be in. And at 5'0", he's like, haha, I play FIFA a lot. This is where they tell you to be. And I say it tongue in cheek and making fun, but I really do believe those are the big factors right now why Mo's not firing as much. It's as much the cohesion of the top 3 and him being deployed a little bit too wide, which I think was to tactically try to help Darwin originally. And I think Klopp's one of these guys that just stays with his overall tactics that he deploys early, and we're just kind of watching the same story pan out every week.
I almost get the feeling sometimes that's why Gakpo is more like central and Nunez is on the left, because Nunez always kind of like shifts over to the left, so that isolates, you know, Mo even more. So I almost feel like maybe that's why you're playing Gakpo in the middle and you were playing, you know, like Nunez on left. But what is the biggest slice there, though? Now that you cut it up and chopped it up over here, like, what do you give it like the biggest slice to? Do you think it's just the fact that, you know, like somebody like Bobby isn't there, or somebody central isn't there to be more dangerous so that Mo can have more space?
I think the absolute biggest slice is the club has dropped off at a level that I think where Mo scored a lot of those goals were because there was a combination between Bobby pressing and those two midfielders behind him, and Fabinho and Henderson being all over everyone, that Mo was constantly put in positions of being 1-on-1 to 1-on-2 to defenders he could get shots off, and he was scoring goals. And I think that because we're not winning the ball back at all, I mean, Brighton basically dominated possession against us for the entire match. At any point they wanted, they had possession of the match. We were playing on the counter on the road in the FA Cup with a side like Brighton playing a weakened team. Wasn't even their best 11.
No, yeah, exactly.
And they played at us. And we put out the best players we could on that day. I mean,
but it wasn't our best 11 either, to be fair. Like, nowhere near. Like he says, you're missing the half the 11.
We got lots of we have lots of hurt people, but honestly, even if Van Dijk was there and playing and we started Henderson and Fabinho, right now, we wouldn't be that much better than Brighton.
No, and I think that goes back. Yeah, I mean, that goes back to the form. And I agree with like the whole Mo thing. I think it's, we were talking about it this morning, actually, with the coffee show with Mateusz, that, as a striker, sometimes, like you were saying earlier, like Mo needs those multiple chances to score. He's not a high conversion guy. I mean, when he was like in total good form and he had the full confidence, I think he was finishing a lot more and he was taking those shots without thinking at all, and not, it looked like forcing. I always go back to, I was talking about this morning, that fourth goal that we scored against United at Old Trafford, where this ball is like coming to him, bouncing, and he doesn't even like try to control it. He just like one times it, where that's just confidence. No, Mo right now is trying to control that, get past the guy, then shoot it. Whereas then he just took it one time right into the corner. I think part of that is like confidence. Another part of that is, I think, knowing that those chances are going to keep coming. And so you don't have to make this one count, knowing you're going to get more of these. So if this doesn't go, the other one will go. I'm just going to do my thing. Eventually the goals are going to come. And I think that's kind of like building up for the entire front line. And I think that's what we're missing the most. I think like when we talk about like midfield and the back line, obviously Van Dijk not being there and stuff like that, transform and all that kind of stuff, I think that's what we're missing the most. We're not putting a scare into anybody. I think when Elliott is your best attacking player, who's probably like more like your attacking midfielder normally, I think there's a lot of concern there. So let me ask you this. Given the chance, the magic wand, if you will, if you had to pick one player that you want to be in peak form right now to get us out of this rut, who are you picking? Could be injured, could be just out of form. Any player you're like, man, I'm taking this guy, poof, he's going to be in top form. I'm going to put him in the starting 11.
I mean, if you gave me a healthy Luis Diaz right now, absolutely top form, best he's ever played for the club, which is basically what pulled us to 2 trophies last year in the second half of the season. It's Diaz all day long. If you told me that I can't have him because he's actually hurt and he's not going to be back this year, and that's not factual, to what me and Brian Shelton think should happen, then it's Mo. Because when Mo is firing, the rest of the team seems to kind of carry along with him and kind of pick it up. And I think what will happen if Mo is going, then I think if Mo's cooking, then Bobby's probably right there with him. Because there aren't many times in Mo's time here at Liverpool where Bobby isn't involved in his biggest highlights. So the two of them kind of come together. So Bo and yeah. You know what I'm saying.
Bo and mommy.
I'm not going to do it a third time. I'm stupid enough to do something once, even dumb enough to do it twice, not 3.
Yeah.
So if Mo
you say that,
and Bobby get going, I think they are a big key. But it's all about the front for me. As much as you can say Fabinho, but here's the thing. I think the Bashik kid has played in the last few matches about as well as you could ask Fabinho to play at times. He played great against Chelsea.
Yeah.
He played really good against Brighton. At this point, you keep giving him starts. And you make Fabinho get out of it and become Fabinho again.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, but then that goes back to, he's not, I mean, maybe at this age, he should start getting used to the role of coming off the bench and like building that mindset. And probably the same goes for Hendo, similar to Milner, like being able to come off the bench and, do his thing. But here's my thing, because I was torn. I was thinking Diaz or Bobby or, Bo or Mommy. But, but,
fair.
Probably more Bobby than anything else, to be honest with you, because I think a healthy, informed Bobby, if you have Nunez next to him or Gakpo on the other side, whoever you have on the left-hand side next to him, can make that click. Because I also thought, do I even say Mo? But if we do that, aren't we automatically making his slice earlier a lot bigger, thinking his form is causing this whole thing?
Yeah, and I didn't want to do that too. That was why I was trying to be realistic. But if you ask me who I think could help us turn it around the fastest, right now, as much as we need a midfield that can stop another team, what we need more than anything is goals.
Yeah.
To win points. Because we're not getting goals. And when you don't get goals, you put more pressure on your weak defense. And your goalkeeper, who is by far your club player of the season. And it's not, I mean, we might as well just hand him the award.
And that's always a bad sign, isn't it? When your, your best player is your goalie, that's never a good sign.
And I don't even think that's a question mark. I think that is, I mean, that's not even this season. That's not even a question. So as much as we need Henderson and Fabinho and our senior midfielders to step up and make plays, we really need to start scoring up front and get back into form. My only concern with Bobby being the player or the most important is it is hard to assume that he'll be able to stay healthy for a long period of time, because it's been a while now since he's been able to hold a good 2-3 month period without an injury of some kind. And that's going back a couple seasons now. And I think we've talked about that when I've, been slayed here for saying things like,
rightfully, I might add,
and then falling on the sword. When we talk about, where he stands in the side and in the squad and his overall kind of spot on the depth chart, it all comes down to his availability. And it hasn't been what he would want or the club would want over the last probably year to year and a half. And I think that's a big, big key, because we do need him, but we also have to recognize this is why players like, whether it's Gakpo or whether it's Carvalho, like someone needs to be groomed along to play his role in this offense, or the tactics need to change where his role in the middle of link up isn't so required to make things work for the guys on the wings.
Okay, I'm glad you said that, because I want to go back to that, what you just said. But before then, I mean, Brian says like Diaz puts sides on their heels and gives this midfield a break. And I think that's what goes back to what I agree. And I think that kind of goes back to what I was saying earlier. I think, we keep harping on the back line or Trent or Gomez or whatever and the midfield and stuff. But I think if we have an attacking force that puts more fear into teams, that protects the back a lot more.
Yep.
But the reason I say I think, and as I think about it more and more, because I was kind of like torn and I want to get your take on it, I think Bobby, because not only attacking wise, I think defending wise, he makes us better. He's the trigger to that press up top. And I think maybe because one thing that Diaz does sometimes is as he's pressing, he falls out of position and stuff like that. I think what Bobby does is he kind of like keeps that front press together and then enables, like whoever is behind him, whether it's Hendo or Fab or Keita, Elliott, whoever it's going to be, to push up to the next guy and win the ball. And that's when we catch the other team and we get like a lot easier goals. And when you do that, you get more opportunities to people like Mo, who needs those opportunities to be able to score. So that's why I always feel like, that's, as I watch these games, the last 3-4 games, as I watch the games, that's all I can think of is, this is what we're missing. And it's not a matter, sadly, it's not a matter of, as we come to the transfer deadline tomorrow and stuff, everybody's talking about, getting this guy, who's getting this and stuff like that. Sadly, our situation is more the injuries are there. It's not a matter of, we need to get somebody. We have the guys. It's just a matter of them being available, hopefully in February. And I always feel with attacking players, it takes a lot longer for them to come back and get in form and stuff, but let's hope for the best over there. So I want to read you this, and then what you this is actually from Pep, and I don't know, I just came across this. It showed up on my feed today, and I kind of feel like it goes with what we've been talking about. I kind of want to get your take on it. It's a Pep quote. I don't know how old it is. I don't know if it's like regarding their like recent form or whatever, but so Pep says, when we win, the game model seems good and it's not questions, but bear in mind we won't always win. Then doubts will come. That is the moment when we will have to trust the model more than ever, because the temptation to move away from it will be very strong. Which is kind of like, we keep saying, hey, we got to try something different and stuff like that. Or is it a matter of being patient so the guys you have start doing what needs to be done better? I don't know if there's a correct answer to this. I just want to get your take.
Yeah, no. I like the question. Here's how I'll respond to it. To Pep's point, I agree with him. When you have a plan and it has worked for you, it's in the times that it gets toughest. That sticking with the plan is the hardest thing to do, but is always the most prudent, right? Because that was your goal, and that's what's made you winners and champions and all these great things. So on the macro level, that makes all the sense in the world. If we break this down to our Liverpool side right now and how we would apply that quote to us, for me, it doesn't hold as much water from this standpoint. I think we've shifted to the talent we have on our side, to actually alter what tactics we do to actually be the most successful. So I think you don't have to, if you can't stick to the plan if you've changed up some of the ingredients in which that plan works through. And I think right now we can't play the 4-3-3 high energy tempo that we want it to play. And I think our best players, when we want to put out our best 11, don't fit into that formation. So for us, in a way, I think there needs to be a deviation to the model.
Yeah, Brian says you had the right pieces to stick with the model. When you lose those pieces, it doesn't have staying power. So does this also mean then we got the wrong pieces? If the plan was not to change or make changes, do we get the wrong pieces if they're not fitting the puzzle the same way?
Absolutely. And I'll tell you this right now. If the plan was to not change, then I don't know what the bleeping Christ and shit ever happened at FSG or behind those walls. Because giving Klopp an extension, then going out and buying players like Elliott and Carvalho made no sense. It really didn't.
If there was no plan to change. Because all summer, when we saw those moves, we talked all summer, right? We said it's
Carvalho, Elliott, even years ago we saw it coming. You even saw it starting. I thought the purchase of Thiago was to go to 2 at the pivot like they had it in Bayern.
Yeah.
It only made sense. Like, that was something I always thought when we went that move. I thought that was a slow burn to a 4-2-3-1 to a 4-2-2-1 to like all different formations. And he just kept going out there and being like, yeah, I don't care if it's Thiago. He's going to play in Gini's spot. But we can laugh. But there wasn't that much rotation where we knew it was Gini's spot and it was Mane's spot and it was right. Like, now we talk about like filling, who's going to fill Bobby's role. That doesn't happen at other clubs. I got to be fair. City wasn't like they lost Aguero. They went to a false 9. They won a league by 1 point and they pipped us and they could have won the Champions League. And they were like, shit, we better go out and get Haaland, right? They ripped up everything. And they were like, well, we have this great number 9 now. We should play around those skill sets.
Yes. I mean, you can still modify, like you can have your, the big picture, but you can make small tweaks to it. And I think that's what we're kind of lacking. Like if you do not have, but I mean, when you play, I think it's a bit easier for City to be able to do that because of their big picture. It's a lot more control, slower pace, keep the ball, keep possession and stuff. Ours is a more like the heavy metal thing where, it's a lot harder to modify and make little tweaks because it's just like constantly going at you. So you can't just change that and say, okay, well, we're not going to press there suddenly. It has to be nonstop.
So if we do that, right, and I agree with you, could we logically have gone through the last 3.5 to 4 seasons the way we have without actually buying to strengthen the side and think we were going to keep playing to that level of pace and power and not have the wheels run off?
You think they underestimated the power of like the beating that last season would be? Or maybe we didn't expect to. We normally just trot out the kids over there, get eliminated early in the League Cup and stuff. When we were like, oh shit, man, we keep advancing over here, and maybe underestimated, that success of being able to possibly get like freaking like 4 trophies and stuff and chasing that, and kind of like did not see the toll it would take overall on the squad, because it's not like it was a very deep squad to start with.
Yeah, I don't know, man. I honestly, I don't know if they underestimated it, Timuchin. I'm not sure. I think they honestly thought this team was going to be just as geared up, like coming out of last year's 63 matches, and they were just going to show up like piss and vinegar and like run through a wall and compete on 4 fronts again. Like, I do think in some ways the recruitment is a little arrogant and naive. But I think we've talked about the manager being that way at times with like running down contracts and like being so loyal. Like
exactly.
I do, and I'm not gonna, and that's not a, everyone gets all up on us anytime we say anything that's critical of the club or critical of the manager, right? No one wants to hear either. You can shit on these players like they've done nothing for us, like everything, people. Like, seriously. But you can, like, bang on a player. You can call Trent a terrible defender. You can, rip on...
but even then, there are layers, Gally. Like, I was just telling, like, I think we were talking with, like, Megan earlier today. Van Dijk can take a shit in the middle of the box, and then it will be somehow like Matip's fault. Like,
oh, absolutely. Oh, there are definitely angles. I mean, there are layers to this, no question. No question there. I mean, just try to ridicule anything that Virgil's ever done in this side. You're just, I mean, he delivered everything great. I mean, Allison rolled the ball to a Wolves player. They kicked it in the net. Other than the dude from Texas who doesn't like his hair, I don't think there's a single person that would have a problem with that all day long. But there are some guys that get away with it. There are some guys that get criticism, right? But ultimately, we don't really lean in on the manager. We don't really lean in on the players. We go all in on the owners at all times.
Yes.
And I think,
when you say we, you mean the fan base, right?
The fan base. I don't mean we as in the show.
Yeah,
I mean we as in supporters. With 1 day less left in the transfer window, I think we would be remiss to not at least acknowledge that we went out in this transfer window where all we needed was a midfielder and got ourselves another attacker. I am all for it because I think he's a really good player, and I think it was a smart buy at a good price. And I think in the long run, he'll turn out to be a really good purchase for the club. And I think that as much as we needed midfielders, we actually had more of a need on January second when he was purchased for an attacker on the left.
Yeah.
Then we actually needed a midfielder at that moment with the injuries we had and not knowing how long
setback and stuff. Yeah. Yeah.
And the fact that clearly the club knew that Bobby was going to be out a lot longer than we were let to be known, because we thought he was coming back at any moment.
Yep.
So for me, I'm fine with them making that move. Do I wish we got a midfielder here in this window? I do. But like, are you worried that the club wasn't able to do anything in this window at all to help with this midfield based on like how much we needed it?
Honestly, somehow not really. Because if we're not going to make an actual big move and get somebody we need, I do not want another Arthur or, Ben Davies and stuff like that. I just don't want that. I mean, unless you're really going out and finishing the deal on Bellingham or getting, I don't know, whoever, like somebody who is going to be bought, not just like loaned as a patch up that we know, you and I know, and probably everybody should know that club is not going to probably play a whole lot anyway, because not going to trust them and stuff. If we were going to just do a move like that, I'm not for it. One thing I would be for, and I think Alan was talking about it earlier in the comments, I wish we would invest and roll the dice a lot more on players like Taki. I thought Taki was an excellent move. Like low cost, low risk, paid huge dividends, was a big factor in that squad, scored a ton of goals, big part of how we won that cup. I wish we took more chances with those players that are 8 million, 12 million, or whatever, young or maybe in a smaller league, and see what happens. Because I feel like the worst case scenario is you're probably turning around and selling him to Bournemouth for the same price you bought him, or you're losing $1 million or $2 million. But the best case scenario is he's the next Robertson. I mean, we're talking about it this morning. Like when we signed Robo, nobody was like, yes, left back problem solved for life. No, nobody thought that. It was like from Hull City. We were like, oh, he's a solid player. Let's see what he does. Nobody was like really excited that summer that we signed Robertson. But you got to take more chances like that. But I feel like that goes back to, that is not on the owners, because obviously they're willing to spend 80 or 100 on one guy. That is not on the owners. I feel that is on Klopp, and he does not like big squads, and he doesn't want all these guys who cost 8, 12 that might or might not be able to do it and will need rotation to get their minutes and to get into the groove. I wish we did more of that. In this window, maybe I got a guy or two that might not save our season this year, but maybe perhaps if it pans out, could be a big part of next season.
So I'm pretty sure that Alan meant, and I know why you brought up Minamino. I think he actually meant Matomo from the kid from Brighton that scored the goal yesterday, being the $2.5 million.
Oh, okay.
But I know what you mean, and I'm with it too. I think we should be trying to sign those players. I think that's where the problem is that we had the, Matoma and Caicedo and Gross and Estupiñán and all these players, right? All these players at Brighton, they were all signed for under 10 million. Every single one of them. And every one of them sells for 60, 70, 80 million. The Nunez kid, we supposedly had a chance to sign him for 26 million in the summer, and we turned it down. We had the deal all lined up with Sporting Lisbon. Whatever reason we didn't get him, he went to Wolves, and now it's talks about us making bids for 40, 45 million for him in the summer. I do think it's hard. I think it is a mixed bag. The manager wants what he wants, and I think we should get him that whenever we can. I also think the transfer committee has to bring in players. But I would say this, it's funny to say it. We made a great money on Minamino, right? And it was really good money. We doubled our profit. He was here for a few years. We won a trophy. I think the player and us both wish he was still in our squad right now.
Probably.
Because we could have used him this year with all the injuries we had up front and having a player that understood the movement we wanted and how to score goals in cheap matches. Because he could have played all these cup matches that we're arguing.
Imagine if he had starting our players in the middle.
Well, I don't know if you saw Divac's goal yesterday. It's only his second of the year, but it was a stunner from outside the box, like an absolute banger. They were down 5-2 in classic Divac fashion at 5-2 in the 87th minute. He put up a worldie, and then he basically like walked off the pitch, like looking like, I don't even know why I'm here. Is there a fashion show tonight?
Back to a fashion show. But I mean, that's the thing with like Taki. It was a good move to move on from him because I think we all can agree that he was never going to be your starting 11 guy. But that's when you make your money. Now you roll the dice on the next one. You get a couple of Takis and see what happens there. I mean, Kazi says, I think he wants more off the finished article than less he has to take chances on. Well, that's how you go broke. And that's why this system has not worked. That's why we run out contracts of players that we can get money on. And then we complain about the owners somehow instead of the manager who's kind of like running down these contracts, not getting any value of current players that you can sell. When it's summer, when we can't sign to a guy to an extension, he's got to go. Like, you don't want to be here, you got to go. Because then let's use that money to bring somebody else that at least we know wants to be here for the next 2-3 years. Because when you went to January, now you're showing your hand to everybody. They're not going to pay you the value. And now you're like, well, that's not enough. Well, then you get stuck with it. And if you need examples, I mean, look at every year, there's 1 or 2 guys that we just let go that we can probably make money off of.
Where I agree with Kazi's point here about doesn't he do this with Carvalho, Ramsey, Elliott, Taki? You know, he doesn't mind taking those chances, but he also wants lads dropping to the team. I absolutely agree he wants those players dropping to the team. Where I disagree is that he really has never given Carvalho, and maybe he has, and Carvalho has just been an absolute failure and it won't work in this system. But it seemed to me like we all had questions about where he would fit into this system when he was a Fulham player being linked with this system. And in Ramsey's case, he's just gotten no chance, whether it be injury. He's had some run in the under, the youth teams. Elliott has gotten his shot, and I think the manager clearly loves him, and Taki didn't work out. So I think there are those shots you give those players, but I don't know that Carvalho or Ramsey have been given any chance to actually integrate into this side to a point where we know what kind of player they are. Or the manager.
Ramsey, like you say, it's probably more on him because of injuries. He has not been healthy enough. But even when he was healthy, I guess he missed the preseason, so maybe he was healthy but not fit, because those are two different things. Like, he was able to play but not to the level that we want and stuff. But I agree with Carvalho. When we bought Carvalho, nobody thought, oh, this kid is going to be a great left winger in this system. I mean, who thought that? I hope to God Klopp didn't think that. Like, when we bought this, this is going to be great on the left wing. I mean, I guess, we had like Diaz and stuff then anyway. So I don't think that was the plan. We just never played him. I don't think it's fair to, we do this with Curtis sometimes too, play a midfielder as a left wing and then expect him to play like a left winger and then complain when they don't. I don't think it's like kind of fair to the player too. I think he wants more of a direct system with Darwin, but to say where does Fabio fit in, we won't know until he has all his players. Have been, Fabinho and Henderson have been Space Jam. Yeah, unfortunately, that's the biggest problem. But here's the thing.
Very well put, Kazi.
Stick with the plan, but there is also something to kind of like stick with what doesn't work over and over again with the same personnel and hoping something else is going to happen 3 days from the first time. Especially when it's one thing when a player has a bad game, a lot of misplaced passes or, like missed chances. That's fine. But when you keep looking at your squad game after game after game, and they're nowhere near the miles they were putting before, you got to realize you're doing something wrong and make changes accordingly. And that's when I went back to, that's why I asked you about like the Pep thing. I think if you have a system and this is what that system demands, and if you don't have that, you got to be able to kind of bring your system down a little bit and adjust that way. So having said that, how do we adjust the system, or what do we change going to Wolves? Do you think it's the same lineup, maybe with Nunez in there? What are you making with the lineup there? Because these are like pretty much must wins if you're going to make top 4.
Well, it is absolutely the same back 5.
Okay.
Maybe maybe you give Matip a start
over Gomez.
Of course. I mean, it's not for Kanate. I mean, Kanate was the best player on the pitch, in my opinion, in red. And if it wasn't for Kanate, we'd probably lose that thing as embarrassingly as we lost the one in the league, to be honest. But I think you have to start the same back five. At some point, you are going to have to give Costas some playing time, and you're going to have to give like some of these other players, not James Milner, starts. But I think it's Matip, maybe Darwin. I wouldn't take Gakpo out, but it's hard to take out Elliott at this point with him scoring goals. So maybe Darwin over Gakpo, Matip over Gomez.
So, okay, so you guys are removing Gakpo from the 11. Yeah, I was almost wondering, do we shift Elliott back to midfield, maybe instead of like Keita?
I think it'd be harsh on Keita right now. I think Keita's given you like 3 or 4 of the best performances in a row he's given you in about a year and a half. And to Kazi's point, as sick as it is, Klopp has settled on the fact that Keita is in the best midfield, along with a 19-year-old. None of us knew their goddamn name last year. Like, literally, not one person on this podcast knew that kid's name last year at this time.
We definitely couldn't pronounce it when he showed up.
I can't pronounce it now.
I think it's Basetic is what it is. But I think that's the thing, though. I think that Brighton game where Klopp said afterwards, I think it took that long for him to realize that. And I think that's a weakness when you keep, I mean, we're talking general. I think maybe he thought after the World Cup, it would be a whole different scenario. We'd be more back to where we were. But obviously we were not. I think he waited too long. I think that Brighton game was probably the turnaround where he came back and said, I got to make some changes, and actually took some responsibility instead of, the blades not being green enough on the grass, or, like being too short, too wet, whatever the case is. I think finally he kind of like realized that some changes have to be made. And I think that midfield has done well. That's why I feel the front three has to help that midfield, convert a couple and force the turnover.
And I would like to talk about this, and we'll talk about it on another pod. We don't have enough with 5 minutes to go here in the hour. In some ways, is it a testament that Thiago is still in the midfield? Or is it just speak to how poor this midfield has been? That the only midfielder we don't complain about is Thiago, yet all match when we're talking, no one says a single thing about what Thiago is doing all match long.
Oh, I was bitching about Thiago the entire. I'll be honest. I thought he was one of the weaker ones.
I guess that's. I guess in a kind of like a side conversation to maybe table a comment for next week, right? I actually think Thiago has been one of the poorer midfielders for us all season long since August. It cost him a spot at the World Cup. He can't get into the Spain team outside of a couple of 18-year-olds. He looks like he's a little slower, still playing Hollywood passes and not really giving anything else on the other side of the ball. Yet he has played almost every single minute of every single match we've had this year. Yet all we do is complain about the inefficiencies of this midfield. And we can hammer on Fabinho's lack of form and Henderson dropping off the planet, right? But maybe it's the fact that Klopp has almost built the midfield around what he wants Thiago to be doing, and it doesn't work for anyone else. And there are a lot of people that actually will make the argument that since Thiago has come into this side, we've actually slowed down, and we won 2-0, penalty shootouts for trophies last year. And in some ways, it was the team that won the title and went to the other Champions League final and won it. Like, we played different before he was here. I think it's a really
that
good.
Everybody bitched about that it wasn't creative enough, and we needed a creative midfielder and stuff. Like, what is I love, and that's what drives me nuts with the fan base is suddenly Genie is the best player in the world. People could not wait to get rid of Genie. What does he even do and stuff like that? And they were like, "Well, we should have always kept Genie." Really, you weren't saying that shit before, and but that goes back to I think what we were talking about earlier with Van Dijk and stuff. I think if Hendo played like Thiago, and Thiago played like Hendo, it would be called out instantly. The number of bad passes that Henderson is making. What is he doing? He can't pass to the guy next to him and stuff. I think because he is so smooth. He's a joy to watch. I'll give him that.
Oh, he's a wonderful player.
So smooth on the ball and stuff. But the number of misplaced passes that he had in the last 2-3 games, and I'm talking simple passes. I'm not talking, oh, I thought you were gonna make a run that way, and it's not a matter of like people not being used to playing with each other. This is a guy like right next to you trying to kind of like almost be a little too fancy at times, and that stuff is nice and cute and it looks good when you're up to 0 already, and you're just like almost like putting salt on the wound. But when you're chasing a goal, when you're chasing a game, that's frustrating, especially when it's misplaced. But I totally agree with you, but I think that goes back to what we were talking about earlier. Certain players can get away with that without getting the criticism, while others can't. And I think that's like the biggest problem there. And Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. You can flip him back and forth. I'm not saying like Hendo has played great. I just know that if Hendo played like Thiago, it would definitely be called out a lot more, like you're saying, like that Thiago is being called out.
That's all. I was just it just feels awkward because in this year of Klopp's done a good job actually of kind of managing the side, in my opinion, with regards to poor play. He's yanked Trent at times. He's subbed off Matip in at moments where he wants to make a moment or a point about what he's frustrated with on the pitch. It just feels like maybe so many players are struggling. One or two have been able to hide or skate by under how poorly everyone is playing around them. And I think it just comes back to the fact that this entire side just needs a swift kick up, side of the ass and figure out how to start winning matches, accumulating points, and qualifying for the top 4.
I think this team needs a run of wins. I think Brian was talking about earlier that, like the next 4 games and stuff. This team just needs to be able to string along a couple of wins. One pretty, one kind of ugly to remind you that we can win ugly, another pretty one. Like you need games like that. I think like apart from that like Bournemouth massacre we haven't had like we didn't continue to build on that. We didn't have like 3-4 of them back to back to be like, okay, they're back. And I think that's especially attacking. It's a lot of confidence, and I think that just it's not over. By the time this podcast is over, Chelsea would have signed 4 players by now. That's another conversation to get to. And that just looked like they're like, buy the guy. Oh, wait, there's an improved model. I didn't know that. Well, let's sell him then, and let's just buy him. It's just, it's just some of the moves. That I think to me that shows you can make moves, but it has to make some kind of a sense and have a plan. What we were talking about earlier, have a plan at time. But that's a conversation for another day. I'm sure Thursday podcast, the boys will probably focus a lot on the transfer deadline and stuff like that. On Wednesday morning, we'll talk about a lot of other thing as well. Go ahead, Gary.
Well, let's end with this positive note, and it's always great to end with a positive Kazi drop. If Liverpool win 4 on the bounce, we win 10. I'm so sure. And you know what? I don't actually disagree with him. I think if we were to roll off 4 or 5 wins in a row, I could see us winning 8, 10, getting 12 out of 15 results, whatever it is. Like, I think we have every bit in our power to go on a big, huge run here. I think we have a chance to go on a big run here through the Champions League. And I'm sure we'll touch on that in the coming weeks when we get closer to the Champions League rounds. I think we have big opportunity here, but this is the thing. It can't start until we actually have a performance.
Yeah.
Let's get a. We talk about 4 wins. Let's get a win.
Yeah, and that's the thing. You got to start somewhere. And I agree. I think, this team, I think Klopp was talking about that he didn't become a shit manager overnight, and he was probably never as good as everybody thought. And this team did not become shit overnight either.
Correct.
This just shows that confidence and like constant winning is huge in professional sports. I mean, regardless of what level these guys are at and how much experience they have and they're international captains, blah, 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 confidence still plays a huge part. And this team is clearly lacking it right now, second guessing everything they're doing. And I think the only way to get past that is string along a couple of wins. To be able to do that is to get the first win. So do we get the first win this weekend? Give me a score.
Yes, we get a win. I'm not giving you a clean sheet. I'm going to say it's 3-1 Liverpool.
I like it. I'll go with 3-1. I'll double up on that. Yeah, 3-1 sounds about good because, yeah, I don't trust as much on the clean sheet either, but I do expect a much better performance. I think we are building on something. I don't know. Maybe it's just like wishful thinking. And transfer deadline, or as Kazi says, for Liverpool Tuesday, do you expect it like a last-minute surprise, or it's going to be, let's stick to what we got?
Tuesday.
Yeah, Tuesday sounds good. Well, speaking of Tuesday, we won't be back Tuesday, but we'll be back Wednesday morning. I'll be back in the morning, and then Thursday night, obviously, Mecca and the gang will be back. I'm sure they'll preview the Wolves game a lot more, and they'll probably talk about the transfer deadline and some of the moves that were made around the league, and all the moves that we'll be making tomorrow will be that as well. Brian says 2-1. Let's just stick with the 3-1 over here. Let's not muddy the waters and have a nice weekend for once. Well, Gally, thanks a lot. And thanks to all those listening, commenting. Always appreciate it. Give us a like and share and all that good stuff. A lot of good content coming up. Our writers are constantly churning out stuff, and not the usual clickbait stuff that you get everywhere else, but actually articles that thoughts went into, which is a nice change when you see some of the junk out there. But we'll be back. I'll be back Wednesday morning with our very own Egyptian king, Bo and Mommy and all those guys. We'll see you guys then. Take care.